The wind howled across the frozen surface of the planet, carrying with it a bone-chilling cold that seemed to freeze everything it touched. The sky above was a dull gray, clouded with the endless storms that raged across this desolate world. The planet was not a place for life, but for some, it was a harsh reality. On the surface, a lone figure staggered forward, their every step leaving footprints in the thick snow. Their breath came out in shallow gasps, visible in the cold air, but they didn't stop. They couldn't. The chill gnawed at their bones, making their every move feel like a struggle against a force that wanted nothing more than to take their life. This figure was a human, one of the few to have survived a crash landing on this icy wasteland. They had been part of a team sent to explore this planet, a mission that had gone horribly wrong. The ship, which had been their lifeline, now lay in ruins far behind them, a twisted wreckage scattered across the frozen ground. The human's name was Alex. She had been the pilot of the ship, the one in charge of keeping everything on course. But now she was all alone, stranded with no help in sight. The cold seemed to reach into her very soul, draining her energy and will to go on. Her fingers were numb, her legs weak, and her head spun with dizziness as the cold made it hard to think clearly. She had tried to call for help, tried to send a distress signal, but there was no one out here. The communication systems on her ship had been damaged in the crash, and now she was left to face the harsh reality of this world by herself. The world had no mercy for her. It was a lifeless rock that cared not for the struggles of any creature that called it home. If she didn't find warmth soon, she knew she wouldn't survive. As the storm raged around her, Alex's thoughts began to fade. The cold was too much, too overwhelming. It was as though her body was shutting down, telling her that survival was no longer possible. The thought of giving up was tempting, but she couldn't. Not yet. She was a fighter, always had been. But the freezing temperatures were relentless. Suddenly, Alex heard something. A low hum, a faint sound that cut through the howling wind. She stopped in her tracks, her heart racing. Was it a signal? Could it be a search party? Or was it just the wind playing tricks on her? She strained her ears, listening harder. The hum grew louder, then stopped altogether. The silence was deafening, more terrifying than the wind that screamed around her. There was no way she could be hearing things. That sound had been real. Her fingers trembling, Alex pulled up the small portable scanner she had on her wrist, hoping it would pick up anything that could be of help. The display flickered, showing a faint signal just a few miles away from her position. A burst of hope shot through her veins, but it was fleeting. What if it was another person stranded, like her? What if it was a trap? There was only one way to find out. With renewed determination, Alex set off toward the source of the signal, pushing herself through the deep snow. Each step was harder than the last, her energy sapping with every move. The cold air cut into her skin, and every breath she took felt like inhaling shards of ice. But she couldn't stop. She had to keep moving. Time seemed to stretch on forever. The wind whipped against her face, stinging her skin, and the snow piled higher around her boots. But through the storm, the signal grew clearer. The static on her scanner faded, replaced by a strange electronic voice. Help. Needed. Survive. Warmth. Urgent. The voice crackled with static, but the message was clear. Alex's heart skipped a beat. Warmth. She didn't need to hear more. She was close. So close. But as the signal drew her forward, the cold intensified. Her body was shutting down faster now. She knew she didn't have much time. Every movement felt like a battle. She was desperate for any sign of hope, any chance at survival. The world around her seemed to blur as the snowstorm intensified. Alex stumbled, her vision swimming. Her legs gave out beneath her, and she collapsed onto the ground, her body racked with tremors from the freezing cold. She fought to stay conscious, to keep her eyes open, but it was getting harder. The cold was winning. Just as everything began to fade, she heard a voice again, clearer this time. Hold on, Don't give up. The voice was soft, but full of urgency. It sounded like a human voice. Another person, maybe. But where? She couldn't tell. With what little strength she had left, Alex forced herself to rise, her body shaking violently. The pain in her limbs was unbearable, but she couldn't give up. She needed warmth. She needed to find the source of that voice before it was too late. As she stumbled forward, the storm continued to howl, and her vision began to fade once again. She pressed on, her heart racing in her chest, determined to reach the warmth she so desperately needed. If I don't, I won't survive. I can't survive without warmth. The cold planet seemed to stretch endlessly before her, but Alex refused to stop. The storm raged, but in that moment, there was still a flicker of hope that she would survive, if only for a little longer. And somewhere ahead, that warmth called to her, a promise of life in the frozen darkness. Alex's determination to survive was unwavering, but with every passing minute, it became harder to ignore the creeping sensation of hopelessness. The storm continued to scream around her, its icy tendrils clawing at her skin, but she refused to let it consume her. She was close. She could feel it. The signal she had detected earlier was still faintly ringing in her ear, guiding her through the darkness of the snowstorm. But with every step, the cold seemed to grow sharper, more punishing. Her feet felt as though they were weighted down by the ice itself, each step harder than the last. Her breath came in ragged gasps, the cold air searing her lungs as if she were inhaling ice. The storm, relentless as it was, didn't just freeze her body. It chilled her mind, making every thought difficult to hold on to. It felt like hours had passed, though it could have only been minutes. Alex's body was starting to betray her, each movement sluggish, her limbs growing heavier with every step. The world around her was a blur of white, the snow swirling in dizzying patterns. She squinted through the haze, trying to focus on the distant horizon, where she hoped the signal would lead her. Her hope, though, was quickly beginning to fade, just like the energy from her own body. But then, through the whiteout, she saw it, an outline in the distance. At first, she thought it was just another mirage, an illusion of the storm. But no, there was something there. It was faint at first, just a dark shape against the blinding white. But it was real. Her heart surged with renewed urgency, her strength returning, if only momentarily. She pushed forward, her steps more desperate now. Please, let it be real. Please, let there be someone there. The wind howled in protest, but she barely noticed anymore. The shadow ahead grew clearer as she approached, and soon, Alex saw what it was. A structure, tall and rigid, standing against the storm. She could hardly believe her eyes. The signal had led her to something solid, something that could offer the shelter she so desperately needed. But as she neared the structure, her relief quickly turned to doubt. The closer she got, the more she noticed something wasn't right. The walls of the structure looked battered, half buried in snow, and there were no signs of life around it. No warm light in the windows, no sounds of movement inside. It appeared abandoned. Alex's stomach twisted. Was this a trap? She didn't have the luxury to think too much on it, not with the cold slowly numbing her fingers and toes. She needed warmth, whatever it took. She approached cautiously, her senses on high alert. The entrance was partially obscured by piles of snow, but it was wide enough for her to crawl through. She hesitated for a moment, her breath coming fast. But then she pushed herself forward, barely able to lift her arms to clear the snow blocking the doorway. Inside, the air was still, stagnant, and frigid, though not as bone-chilling as the outside. The darkness was thick, and Alex could barely make out anything within. Her breath echoed in the emptiness as she took a few tentative steps inside. The structure seemed like it had been built for survival, but now it was just another forgotten place. The walls were lined with metal, and strange technology blinked faintly, as if still alive, but there was no sign of the warmth she had hoped for. A low hum caught her attention. It wasn't the storm, It was coming from deeper within the structure. She followed the sound, her heart racing as she moved through the dark halls. She could feel the warmth now, distant but real. It was faint, like a flicker in the distance, but it was enough to make her quicken her pace. She rounded a corner and froze. There, in the center of a large open room, was a device, a machine of some sort. It was glowing dimly, pulsing with faint energy. The source of the warmth was coming from it. She had found it. Her pulse quickened, and she hurried toward the machine, her fingers aching as she reached out for it. But as she touched the device, it emitted a low, strange whine, like it was protesting her presence. A voice crackled to life, breaking the silence. "Human, you should not be here." The words were unexpected, and they hit Alex like a shock to her system. She froze, her hand still on the machine. The voice was mechanical, but there was something undeniably human about it, something familiar. Alex's heart pounded. Who is that? She thought. What is this place? State your purpose, the voice demanded. There was an authority in its tone, cold and unyielding. But it wasn't a threat. It was just waiting. I need warmth. Please, I can't survive without it. I don't know what this place is, but Alex's voice broke, her desperation leaking through. The storm outside had taken everything from her, and now she was fighting against time itself. I'm dying out there. Please. The machine hummed again, and for a long moment there was silence. The air around Alex seemed to thicken, and her breath became more difficult to draw. But then, the voice spoke again, softer this time. Warmth. It is the most vital thing you need. You have found it, but it is not yours to take. You must prove your worth. The words confused Alex, but the meaning behind them was clear. The warmth, the survival she sought, wasn't something freely given. It had to be earned. But how? Alex stood there, trembling, uncertain, but more determined than ever. She was not going to die here, not after everything she had fought through. She took a deep breath and made a decision. I'll do whatever it takes, she said, her voice steady despite the cold gnawing at her. The machine buzzed, its lights flickering more brightly now. The voice returned, colder than before, but with a hint of approval. Very well, human. You will face the test. Prepare yourself. In that moment, Alex realized that her survival was no longer just about the cold or the storm. It was about proving herself worthy of the warmth that could save her life. And whatever came next, she would face it head-on. The room seemed to close in around Alex, the walls pulsing with an eerie energy as the machine whirred to life. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath her feet, and a deep, low voice echoed once more from the speakers embedded in the walls. Your test will begin now, human. You must face your fears. Only then will you be granted what you seek. Alex's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure what she expected, but it certainly wasn't this cold, alien challenge. The room around her shifted, as if the walls were alive. And suddenly, the space seemed much larger, the corners stretching further than she could see. It felt as though the very structure was changing, adapting to the nature of her fears. The voice continued, now almost mocking in tone. Fears are powerful, human. They hold you back. They make you weak. If you are to survive, you must conquer them. Only then will the warmth of this place be yours. The temperature in the room seemed to drop even further, and Alex's heart raced. She could feel the cold gnawing at her insides, but she steeled herself. I've come this far. I won't let it defeat me now. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shifted, and she stumbled, catching herself against a wall. The machine's hum was replaced by a crackling noise, and the air around her shimmered. The next moment, the entire room went dark, the buzzing of the machine and the low voice disappearing. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the room began to form again, but this time, it was different. The walls were covered in thick, black vines, and the air felt thick, oppressive. Alex stood in a forest, one that seemed unfamiliar but oddly suffocating. The temperature was still unbearably cold, but the strangest thing was happening. There was something in the shadows, moving, lurking just out of her sight. A rustle of leaves echoed through the dense trees, and then, from behind a cluster of vines, a figure emerged. It was tall, dark, and hulking, its movements jerky and unnatural. Alex's heart skipped a beat, and a wave of terror washed over her. The figure was monstrous, its body twisted and distorted. Its eyes, glowing a fierce red, locked onto hers, and Alex's blood ran cold. She knew this figure. It was the manifestation of her greatest fear, her own reflection, twisted and broken. It was a version of herself, corrupted and cruel, an embodiment of everything she hated about herself. The figure's twisted grin spread across its face as it stepped closer. "You think you're worthy of the warmth." The creature sneered, its voice echoing Alex's own, but distorted and mocking. "You think you've earned it. Look at what you've become." Alex's stomach churned. She took a shaky step back, but the figure mirrored her, its grotesque form blocking her every move. "No," she whispered, trying to steady her breathing. "This isn't real. You're not me." The creature laughed, its voice harsh and mocking. "Oh, but I am. I am all the doubts, all the guilt you've carried with you. I am everything that holds you back." Alex's mind flashed to every failure, every moment of weakness, every time she had second-guessed herself. The guilt weighed heavily on her chest, threatening to suffocate her. She could feel her body shaking as the monstrous version of herself advanced, each step thundering like a drumbeat in her ears. "You're not strong enough. You'll never survive out there. You'll always be trapped in this cold, in this fear." Alex wanted to scream, to fight, but her legs felt heavy, her chest tight. The figure reached out, its clawed hand brushing her cheek. "You'll never be free of me." The cold was closing in, and for a moment she wanted to give up. She wanted to let the fear take over, to fall into the suffocating darkness. But something inside her refused to let go. She had survived so much to get here. She wasn't going to back down now. With a surge of adrenaline, Alex took a deep breath and locked her eyes on the monstrous figure. "No," she said again, louder this time, her voice steady and unwavering. "You don't control me anymore." The figure's grin faltered for a moment, a flicker of uncertainty flashing across its face. Alex felt the grip of her fear loosening, just enough to give her the strength she needed. She stepped forward, ignoring the chill that had once consumed her body, and placed her hand against the cold, twisted form of the creature. It recoiled, hissing like a wounded animal. "I've learned from my mistakes," Alex said, her voice gaining strength. "I've faced my demons, and I'm still standing. You don't defy me." The figure shrieked, its form beginning to fade and disintegrate, as if it was made of smoke. The shadows seemed to lift, and the vines that had once entangled the room withered and fell away, leaving Alex standing in an empty, cold space once again. Her chest heaved as she caught her breath. She had done it. She had faced the deepest part of herself, the part that had held her back all these years, and defeated it. The darkness was gone, and for the first time in a long time, she felt lighter. The machine hummed again, its lights flickering on. The voice returned, softer this time, as if acknowledging her success. "You have proven yourself worthy, human. The warmth is now yours." With a soft sigh of relief, Alex turned toward the machine, feeling the warmth begin to fill the room. It was a steady, comforting heat, like sunlight filtering through clouds after a storm. Her muscles relaxed, and she closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the sensation. But as the warmth spread through her, she realized something deeper. The true test wasn't just about surviving the cold, it was about surviving her own fears, her own doubts. And in that moment, she knew that no matter what came next, she was ready to face it. The storm outside was nothing compared to what she had just overcome. And now, with the warmth of victory filling her veins, Alex was more prepared than ever to take on whatever lay ahead. The warmth in the room gradually intensified, spreading through Alex's limbs like a long-lost embrace. She had faced her darkest fear and emerged victorious. But the journey was far from over. The machine's hum continued, now a steady rhythmic pulse in the background, almost soothing. The walls of the chamber, once bleak and cold, were now suffused with a gentle glow, a stark contrast to the harsh environment she had first entered. But as the temperature began to rise, Alex's mind raced. What lay beyond this challenge? Was this really the end of the tests, or was there more waiting for her? Something even darker, more unforgiving than the cold. She had already proven her strength by conquering her fears, but she wasn't naive enough to think that was the ultimate challenge. No, this was just the beginning. The voice crackled to life again, a calm presence in the now warmed space. Well done, human. You have faced your inner darkness. But now we move to a different test. Alex's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what this new test would entail, but she steeled herself for whatever came next. The voice continued, "Survival is not only a battle of the mind. It is a test of your humanity. How far will you go to save those around you?" A strange chill ran through her despite the warmth filling the room. The question lingered, heavy and unnerving. What did the machine mean? Alex had faced her fears, but she had never been forced to confront others in such a way. Without warning, the walls began to shift again, this time in a way that was both disorienting and strange. The room expanded, the floor beneath her feet breaking into sharp angles, as if reality itself was beginning to fold and bend. The lights flickered and dimmed, until all that remained was a soft blue glow that seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. The air grew thick, the weight of the atmosphere pressing against her chest. And then, with a soft mechanical whir, the floor opened up beneath her. Alex gasped as she fell, the ground disappearing in an instant, and for a few terrifying moments, it felt as though she was suspended in nothingness. Panic tried to claw its way up her throat, but she forced herself to stay calm, breathing deeply and focusing on controlling her thoughts. As her descent slowed, the darkness around her began to clear, revealing the new environment. She was standing on the edge of a vast, ruined city, the remnants of skyscrapers towering in the distance. The city was eerily silent, save for the occasional groan of metal or the faint wind whispering through broken windows. The ground was cracked, littered with debris, and the air felt stale and stagnant, thick with the scent of decay. The landscape was barren, lifeless, and yet Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching her. Her pulse quickened as she instinctively reached for the weapon strapped to her waist, only to find that it wasn't there. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She was unarmed and alone, far from the safety she had grown accustomed to in the warmth of the machine's embrace. The voice, soft but still omnipresent, returned. "This is a world you must save, human. You have been given a chance to make things right. The lives of many depend on you." Alex's gaze swept across the desolate city, her mind whirling with confusion. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real, could it? It had to be another test, another illusion designed to test her resolve. But the weight of the voice's words clung to her like an anchor, pulling her toward the center of the decimated city. Her heart pounded in her chest as she began to walk forward, each step feeling heavier than the last. The ruins seemed to stretch on forever, the abandoned streets filled with an uncomfortable stillness. In the distance, she saw movement, a figure stumbling through the wreckage. Her instincts kicked in, and she began to move toward them, her footsteps quickening. As she drew closer, the figure became clearer. It was a woman, her clothes torn and dirty, her face streaked with dirt and tears. She was hunched over, struggling to stand, but her eyes, desperate, pleading, met Alex. "Please, help me," the woman whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. Alex's breath caught in her throat. The woman was terrified, but there was something else in her eyes, something familiar. It was as if she had seen this person before, though she couldn't place where or when. Without hesitation, Alex moved closer, crouching down to offer a hand. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice steady despite the dread that gnawed at her insides. She had no idea who this woman was or why she was here, but Alex's sense of duty drove her to act. The woman's hand grasped Alex's with surprising strength, pulling herself upright. "It's too late," she gasped. "They've already taken everything. There's no hope left." The words hit Alex hard. Her mind reeled, but the voice in the room continued to echo in her thoughts. "How far will you go to save those around you?" As she helped the woman steady herself, Alex felt the weight of the moment settle upon her. This wasn't just about surviving. It wasn't about facing fear or overcoming challenges alone. This was about making the difference. This was about the people, the ones who needed her help. The ruins around them seemed to shift and bend once more, the air heavy with the oppressive sense that something was about to happen, something catastrophic. But Alex had already made her decision. She wouldn't let anyone, especially not this woman, suffer alone. She steadied the woman, her hand gripping hers tightly, and together they moved forward into the darkened, empty city. Each step brought more uncertainty, but Alex felt something stir inside her, something warm, something powerful. It wasn't just the warmth from the machine. It was the warmth of hope, of determination to survive, not just for herself, but for the people around her. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a protector. And no matter what this test threw at her, she would face it head-on. Alex's eyes scanned the ruined cityscape, the faint glow of the distant skyline casting a grim shadow over her path. The wind howled through the empty streets, carrying with it the scent of decay. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional groan of crumbling structures, as if the city itself was mourning its fate. Despite the chilling atmosphere, there was a spark of something inside her, something that had been kindled when she first helped the woman. A fire, a determination that refused to be extinguished, no matter how dire the circumstances. She moved with purpose now, her boots crunching on the cracked pavement as she led the woman through the deserted streets. The woman was weak, struggling to keep up, but Alex's resolve didn't waver. Every step felt heavier, but she knew she couldn't stop. The ruins of the city, the desolation around them, seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. Yet Alex felt an undeniable pull toward something. A place, a goal. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but it was something she had to reach. "We can make it," Alex muttered under her breath, her voice more for herself than the woman. She wasn't sure why she said it, but the words felt like a promise. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting for something greater. The city, the people, everything. It all needed saving. The woman stumbled beside her, her breaths shallow and labored. "I don't know. I don't think we can," she whispered, her voice tinged with fear and hopelessness. Her eyes darted nervously around them, as though expecting the very air to turn hostile. But Alex shook her head, offering a reassuring smile. "We have to try," she said, her voice firm. There was no other choice, not anymore. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet trembled, the vibrations rippling through the air like an approaching storm. Alex froze, her heart racing. The city had been eerily still until now, and the sudden quake sent a surge of panic through her. She glanced up, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of what had caused the tremor. But the landscape remained as desolate as ever, the broken buildings towering like silent sentinels. Then she heard it, a faint whirring sound, growing louder by the second. A figure emerged from the shadows, moving with a fluid grace that seemed out of place in this dying world. Alex tensed, instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. She wasn't unarmed anymore, but the new sense of vulnerability was all too real. The woman beside her gasped, her face pale with fear. The figure drew closer, its silhouette becoming clearer in the dim light. It was humanoid in shape, but there was something distinctly alien about its movements, something unnatural. Its eyes glowed faintly, and its skin seemed to shimmer, almost as if it were made of liquid metal. The whirring sound intensified as it approached, the figure coming into full view. "Stay behind me," Alex whispered, her voice barely audible. She didn't know what this thing was, but she had no intention of letting it get anywhere near the woman. Whatever it was dangerous. But before she could make a move, the creature stopped in its tracks. Human. It spoke in a voice that was both mechanical and oddly comforting, like a lullaby from another world. "Do not be afraid. I am not here to harm you." Alex's heart skipped a beat. The words were clear, but the tone was unsettling, cold. She hesitated, trying to make sense of the situation. This thing, this being, was not like anything she had ever seen before. It was as though it didn't belong to this world, yet it spoke in a language she could understand. You're not human," Alex said, her voice filled with suspicion. She couldn't help herself. She was scared, but she forced herself to stand tall. She wouldn't let fear control her. The figure tilted its head slightly, its glowing eyes studying her with an unsettling intensity. "I am not, but I am here to guide you," it replied, its tone calm, almost soothing. "You have come far, but your journey is only just beginning. The city is on the verge of destruction, and you must make a choice." Alex furrowed her brow. "A choice? What are you talking about?" She wasn't sure if she should trust this creature. It felt like a trap, but at the same time, something inside her told her to listen. She couldn't explain it, but there was a strange pull toward it, a connection she couldn't deny. "You have been tested, human," the creature continued. "The warmth you seek is not just physical, it is within you. You have proven your strength, but now you must face a deeper challenge. The city, the people, they are all in danger. Only you can save them." The words hit Alex like a wave crashing against the shore. Save them. She was just one person. What could she possibly do? The weight of the task seemed almost too much to bear, but the creature's calm presence made her feel like it was possible. She wasn't sure how, but she knew it was. She had to try. "You will face many trials, but you are not alone," the creature said, its eyes glowing brighter. "You have already begun the path to salvation. Now it is time to embrace your destiny." The air around them seemed to shimmer as the creature began to step back, fading into the shadows as mysteriously as it had appeared. Alex watched in silence, her thoughts racing. What was that? What had just happened? And why did she feel as though something crucial had been set into motion? "Are you okay?" the woman asked softly, her voice hesitant. Alex turned to her, surprised to find that the woman was looking at her with something resembling awe. "I'm fine," Alex said, though her voice was shaky. She wasn't fine. Not at all. But she couldn't let the woman see her uncertainty. She had to be strong, for both of them. As the creature disappeared into the shadows, Alex realized one thing. Her journey wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't just about escaping the cold or facing the unknown. It was about saving everything she could reach. And no matter the cost, she would do whatever it took to protect the people who needed her. The weight of her decision settled in her chest, but Alex was no longer afraid. The road ahead was unclear, filled with dangers she couldn't yet comprehend. But one thing was certain. She would face whatever came next head-on. The air around Alex grew thicker, heavier with every step she took. The once calm streets were now filled with a palpable tension, like the city itself was holding its breath. The woman walked beside her, still weakened by the cold, but there was a flicker of something new in her eyes. Hope. She wasn't sure where it came from, but Alex knew it was tied to the strange encounter with the creature. Whatever the being had meant when it spoke about her destiny, it had ignited something deep within her. Alex's mind raced with questions. Who was that creature? Why had it appeared now, at this critical point in her journey? And what did it mean by her destiny? It was too much to process in the silence of the ruins, so she pushed the thoughts aside for the time being. There was still much to do, and she had no time to dwell on the unknown. The city needed her. The streets began to shift. The further they walked, the more the city began to change. The buildings, once broken and crumbling, now had a strange alien quality to them. Surfaces shimmering and shifting like liquid metal. The distant sound of machinery hummed, faint but growing louder with each step. Alex's eyes widened as she took in the sight. It was as if the city was transforming before her very eyes, becoming something otherworldly. The woman beside her clutched Alex's arm, her breath coming in shallow bursts. "What is happening?" she whispered, fear creeping back into her voice. Alex didn't have an answer. The transformation around them was unsettling, and the fact that the ground trembled with each passing second only made the situation more surreal. She had no choice but to press forward, though. Whatever was happening, she knew it was somehow connected to the creature's words. She had to see this through. They passed through streets that now seemed almost unrecognizable, the once dilapidated buildings now glittering with strange energy. It wasn't long before they reached the edge of the city, where the skyline stretched high into the sky, a mix of technology and ancient architecture. The horizon was alive with color, the sky painted with hues of violet, blue, and red, unlike anything Alex had ever seen before. "What is this place?" the woman asked, her voice trembling. Alex had no answer. It was as though they had crossed into another world, one that defied everything she had known about the planet. The warmth she had so desperately needed was now inside her, a fierce, burning force that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. But it wasn't enough to calm the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Something was coming, something big, and she had to be ready. Suddenly, a voice echoed across the distance, reverberating through the shifting air. The words were not in any language Alex knew, but they were unmistakable in their intensity. The sound was otherworldly, almost melodic, and filled her with a sense of foreboding. The woman beside her flinched, her eyes wide with fear. "What was that?" the woman gasped, clutching her arm tighter. Alex scanned the horizon, her senses on high alert. "I don't know," she said, her voice tight with tension. "But we need to be careful." The voice came again, this time louder, clearer. It was as if the very air was vibrating with its power. The ground beneath them quaked, and Alex instinctively reached for the woman, pulling her closer. The strange metallic buildings around them seemed to pulse with energy, as if they were alive. The city was changing, warping into something new, something dangerous. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. Unlike the previous creature, this one was large, humanoid but massive, its silhouette outlined by the flickering lights of the city. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light, and its presence was overwhelming. It wasn't just an alien being. It was something more, something ancient. The air seemed to hum with its power, and Alex's heart raced. The woman gasped. Is that what we're supposed to face?" Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with fear. Alex didn't know. All she could do was stare at the creature, trying to make sense of what was happening. She had to fight, though. She had no choice. The creature was getting closer, its movements slow but deliberate. The strange energy around them was thickening, and Alex could feel it pressing in on her chest, as if the very atmosphere was suffocating her. "We have to move," Alex said, her voice low and urgent. "Come on." She tugged at the woman's arm, pulling her along as they started running toward a nearby structure that seemed to be their only chance for shelter. But the ground beneath them shifted, and Alex stumbled, nearly losing her footing. She cursed under her breath but managed to regain her balance. The woman's breathing was ragged now, her strength waning as they pushed forward. The figure in the distance was getting closer, and with each step it took, the city seemed to distort even further. Alex couldn't explain it, couldn't understand it, but she knew one thing for certain. The creature, the city, Everything was tied together. And somehow, she was at the center of it all. They reached the entrance of the structure just as the creature's massive form loomed overhead. Alex shoved the woman inside, her heart pounding in her chest. She followed quickly, slamming the door shut behind them. The noise from the outside, the thundering steps of the creature, the vibrations of the shifting city, faded into the background, leaving only the sound of their heavy breathing. "Are we safe?" the woman asked, her voice shaky. Alex didn't answer immediately. She was still processing everything that had happened, every moment that had led to this point. They were in a strange place, facing something they didn't understand, but one thing was clear. The woman had come to her for a reason, and Alex couldn't turn back now. She had to find the strength to face whatever came next. "We're safe for now," Alex said, her voice steady despite the fear she still felt. "But we need to figure out what's happening, and we need to be ready." The woman nodded, her fear still evident in her eyes, but she didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Alex knew they were both thinking the same thing. Whatever lay ahead, they were in it together now. And she wasn't about to let anything, alien or otherwise, stand in their way. For the first time in what felt like forever, Alex allowed herself to believe that they might have a chance. It wasn't over yet. It couldn't be. They had come too far to give up now. And no matter what happened next, she would fight with everything she had to protect the woman and whatever humanity was left in this broken world. The city was waiting, and Alex was ready to face whatever it threw her way. The silence inside the shelter was deafening. Alex stood with her back against the wall, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. She could feel the cold sweat on her skin, the tremors of fear still running through her veins. The creature that had appeared, its immense presence hovering over them, was unlike anything Alex had ever encountered. It wasn't just an alien or a predator. It was something ancient, something that existed before time itself. Its eyes, glowing with that eerie light, haunted her even now. The woman, still clutching her arm, was trying to catch her breath. Her eyes flicked nervously around the room, searching for some sign of hope, but it was clear that she was just as frightened as Alex. They had no idea what to do next, no clear path forward. The city was no longer just a ruined landscape. It was a living, breathing entity, changing with every passing second. The creature, the shifting city, everything felt so intertwined, so out of their control. Alex pushed the thoughts aside. Panic wouldn't help them now. They needed to focus, to figure out what was happening, and how they could survive. She had to remember why they were here in the first place. She couldn't afford to let fear take over. "We need to move," Alex said, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm but firm. The woman looked at her with wide eyes. Where can we go? It's everywhere out there." Alex didn't have an answer, but she knew they couldn't stay where they were. The shelter wasn't going to protect them forever. The creature outside, the city's strange transformation, it was all pointing toward something that neither of them fully understood. She glanced at the strange controls on the wall, buttons, and levers that didn't make sense to her. The room had a futuristic, alien feel, as though it had been designed for beings far more advanced than humanity. She didn't know how to operate any of it, but in the back of her mind, she knew there was something crucial here. She could feel it in the air, in the shifting energy of the city. "What do we do now?" the woman asked, her voice small and filled with uncertainty. "We wait," Alex said. "For now, but not for long." She had no idea what they were waiting for, but something deep inside her told her that answers were coming. She wasn't sure how or when, but they would find out what had happened to this planet, to the city, to everything. And it would all start with the creature. Suddenly, a flash of light caught Alex's attention. It wasn't like the glowing city lights. This was different, more intense, more direct. She turned toward the source, her heart racing. The walls of the shelter trembled slightly as the light grew brighter, almost blinding. It was coming from outside the shelter, and in that moment, Alex knew with every fiber of her being, that this was it. This was what they had been waiting for. She grabbed the woman's arm, pulling her toward the door. The strange energy that had been pulsating through the city seemed to be drawn toward them, feeding on their fear and uncertainty. Alex didn't know how much time they had left before whatever this was would consume them entirely. The door to the shelter creaked open, and the blast of cold air hit them with full force. They stepped out into the street, their breath coming in sharp bursts as the chill gripped them once more. The light from the creature, the one that had been haunting their every step, was now closer, its pulse vibrating through the city like a living thing. But now it wasn't alone. More figures appeared in the distance, emerging from the shadows, each one larger than the last. They moved in unison, their bodies glowing with the same strange energy that had been powering the city. These creatures were unlike anything Alex had ever seen. They weren't just alien. They were monumental. The woman beside her gasped, her legs shaking with fear. Alex gripped her tighter, pulling her closer. This was the moment she had been dreading. But now there was no turning back. "Stay close," Alex whispered, her voice steady. "We can't let them separate us." The woman nodded, her face pale but resolute. She knew the stakes, and she wasn't going to let fear stop her. Not now. The ground beneath them vibrated again, a deep hum that seemed to come from the very heart of the planet. Alex looked up at the creatures, their glowing eyes focused on them, as if they had been waiting for this moment all along. "We have to keep moving," Alex said, more to herself than the woman. "We need to find out what they want, what this is all about." With every step they took, the creatures followed, but they weren't attacking, not yet. Instead, they seemed to be observing, studying. It was almost as if they were waiting for something, or someone. Then, just as Alex thought she might lose her sanity from the sheer intensity of it all, the creatures stopped. They had reached a massive structure, taller than any building she had ever seen, its surface shimmering with the same energy that had enveloped the city. The leading creature stepped forward, its eyes glowing brighter than ever. Then, in a voice that resonated with an otherworldly power, it spoke. "We have been waiting for you." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. Alex felt the ground shift beneath her feet, her heart pounding in her chest. This was the moment. The answers she had been searching for were finally within reach. But the question remained, was she ready to face whatever lay ahead?